Okay, welcome everyone to the class. This is a class about Parshes Mishpatim. Mishpatim includes in it much of the legal code of the Jewish religion, the legal aspects which goes over a number of different areas within the legal code, in particular aspects which relate to damages, and that's what we're going to focus somewhat on today. In chapters 22, from the verses from 6 to 14, we talk about the different types of shemrim. They are the people who are a designated person who's who's holding for you on your behalf in some sort of way an object, and where there are four classes of shemrim, of people who are guardians. They're legally holding something for you, or might be a person who's a watchman for you, a unpaid watchman, a paid watchman. Let's go through them. There is the basic person which is dealt with in verses 6 to 7, the unpaid watchman. And that person, if something happens to the object that he was guarding on your behalf, for instance, if it was stolen, that person is not considered accountable for the issues. However, if for some reason there was a damage that was that was the watchman's issue, or that was some aspect that the theft was caused by negligence, then the unpaid watchman is required for compensation. That's the verses 6 to 7. The verses 9 to 12 talk about a paid watchman. That is a person. His job is to take care of the object that he's taking care of, and he's held accountable for majority of issues, and in particular he's held accountable for theft. But if it came the multiple occurrences that the object that he was watching was went through some sort of damages, if it was beyond his control, then he's not liable. He did everything that he could in a responsible manner. However, if the animal of itself died, or armed robbers came along, then he's not considered responsible. There are the other groups that we're going to, the other two, but those two are basically two extremes. We have the person who's not paid, an unpaid shamer. We have the person who is paid. Then we have another class. We have a borrower, somebody who borrows an object from another person. Now he's essentially taking full responsibility. He wants to use it. He's taking some advantage of it. So in that case, the borrower was liable even for occurrences beyond his control. For instance, the death of an animal that he borrows. If the tool that he borrowed breaks, he's responsible for replacing it. Now, the essential difference between the accountability between the first two that we described and the borrower is that it's the duty of the first two types of shemrim to watch over the owner's object and return it to him in full working capability. Their responsibility stems from their own commitment that they're guarding the object. One's an unpaid person, the other person's a paid person, and depending on the extent of their their being paid depends on whether they are liable or not, and hence they are not responsible for occurrences beyond their control, since their care that they're watching over the object has no effect on whether a unforeseeable occurrence can happen or not. In contrast to the intention of the borrower, his job, what he's doing is that he's using the object. Because the owner has given him the right to use the object without paying for it, he's considered that he is using, he's benefiting, and he's not paying for anything. So in that case, his responsibility becomes the maximum, and he's responsible for any damages in all eventualities, except for the specific case that if the object breaks down while it's being utilized, and that was the whole purpose that it was borrowed for, that's not the borrower's problem. Now, there is another class that the Torah talks about, and that's the person who hires an object out, right? So in that case, any loss that's incurred is covered by the rental that he's paying. What type of loss are we talking about? We're talking about that, and this is actually two divergent opinions in halacha. The hire is compared to, from one point of view, one sage in the Talmud, Rabbi Yehuda, says that the hire is compared to an unpaid watchman, and therefore is exempt of anything, and exempt of theft. And he does not consider the hire's access, the usage of the object, as actually a payment for watching the object, since he's actually paying for this access. Therefore, he doesn't have a responsibility for to guard the object, and therefore he's not considered, in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, responsible in that regard. But according to his colleague Rabbi Meir, which is actually the accepted opinion, the hirer is liable for theft, but exempt from uncontrollable circumstances, and therefore the hirer is essentially a person who's borrowing. He takes the opinion that the hirer is a person of someone who's borrowing because he wants to use the object. He wants to use the object for his own benefit, and therefore he has to be held responsible for all eventualities. However, because the hirer pays for the use, he's not capable, he's not culpable, he's not required to give a return if there is something uncontrollable occurrence that happened. So therefore, the hirer is some sort of mix between a borrower and a paid watchman, in that and with relationship to the nature of his accountability, and he's like that of a borrower, while his actual responsibilities are like the paid consignee. Now, that's the legal aspects of being a shamer, of being a watchman, and that's the legal rules that we have within the legal code of the Jewish law. But as we know, everything in the Torah has a spiritual side. In fact, the Torah really is talking about spiritual worlds and spiritual kingdoms, but it embraces our physical world and expresses them in a physical sense. Specifically, we talk about that in the spiritual realm, we in fact, all people, all human beings, specifically Jews, but all human beings, we are all shemrim. We are all watchmen. In what way? Because God has entrusted us with the objects that he has created in the world. And he's entrusted us as a as watchmen, watch people, in relationship to the different things that he's given us. For instance, our divine soul, our neshama, like we say in our morning prayers, that Hashem has given us our soul and returned our soul to us, so that we guard it and we implement it and we use it to do our job in the world, to fulfill our divine mission. So our divine soul, our fellow friends, our fellow human beings, and the world at large are all aspects and objects that we are being a shamer, we are being a watchman over. We have to employ them, we have to engage with them, and we have to guard them, and we have to do things with them. So reviewing our rules that we said before, the 4 classes of Shemrim, the 4 classes of watch people, we can understand and we can map ourselves into those 4 classes of watch people in their rules that they have to obey. As an example, in relationship to our neshama, in our most days when we're not achieving the object that we were that God has given us, the objective that God has given us, then we can say we are of the class of Shemrim, the class of guardian that's considered a borrower. What is that? The borrower, we said, his idea is that he's not paying for the object, but he's utilizing the object. And so ourselves, we use and enjoy all the capabilities of our own neshama, of our soul, our capabilities of understanding. We use the capabilities of our creative talents, and if we don't use them out for God, then we're not being reciprocating. We might use out our fellow human beings, or we use out all the things around the world in us without reciprocating and giving back to God. At that time, we are like borrowers. We've borrowed the capabilities from Hashem and not necessarily giving back. If we don't say our thank yous, our blessings, learning God's Torah, doing active things, we're just utilizing, and then we're not reciprocating. Hence, we are totally responsible for all our own deeds. Hashem holds us responsible, like the borrower. He is responsible for all things if they go wrong, because the object that we've borrowed, the owner is expecting it to get it back in the same way as he's given it. And if we've sullied our neshama, or if we've made problems to the people around us, or we have destroyed parts of the other world, we've utilized them without giving back. So that's one level of understanding the watchman, who's called a watchman from the point of view that he's a borrower. He's not paying for anything, he's not giving back, but he's utilizing. But at times, we are like one of the other watchmen. At times we do better. We're like the person who hires. He hires the object. What does that mean in a spiritual sense? We said that the hirer is responsible in cases of negligence, and we said that And we said the hira is also, according to the halacha, responsible for theft, but not responsible for uncontrollable occurrences or damages in the course of work. So therefore, when we act as the hirer, that is, we pay for something, we're utilizing what we're given, but we pay in some sort of way. What does that mean? We're recognizing that the true physical and spiritual pleasures in the world, our capabilities, our own resources, our spirit, we recognize that this can only be experienced when we give, and we give back in some sort of way. We give in order to receive, and that's the person who is hiring. He's hiring, but he gives back in some sort of way. And so also we give back to Hashem in the job that he's entrusted to us, that we are doing some elevation in the world, and we are transforming the world, making it a better place. And then we can make the next jump to the next class of person that we've enumerated, who's a God, and we leave the world of the people who are utilizing, that is the hirer. He's utilizing with a sense of aspect that he's required to pay in some sort of way, or we even beyond the class that we call the borrower, who's only interested in himself and the world of himself, and he's only interested he's only interested in advancing his own self. If we move from that class, we go to the other extreme, what we said, the person who's a watchman and he's paid for it. What is that in a spiritual sense? The physical sense, we understand that a watchman is paid for the work that he watches, and for the guarding that he's doing over all the objects that in his realm of responsibility. So he's watching and he's guarding over that. He is paid for it. He expects payment. So this, in a spiritual sense, who is this? This is the person that is not really thinking about himself, and he's not really thinking about achieving the pleasures that he will achieve or he will enjoy utilizing the objects that he has. What he's involved in is that he sees himself as a caretaker in God's property, his own neshama and the other souls that are people around him. But he's not seeing them and that as something that he can utilize for his own personal benefit, but he sees that he's going to get a payment, a spiritual payment in the future, and achieve God's gifts for all the purposes that he does in order to assist God in completing the divine mission that he has for the world. And therefore, as the paid shamer, the paid watchman, is not necessarily looking beyond the reward that he's going to get, but he's not locked up in focusing on that he's going to reward. His main purpose is to elevate the world, as well as expect that he will get payment for it. The highest level of spirituality reflected in the verses of the Shemer on a spiritual understanding of what this guardian is the unpaid guardian. What is that? Who is that person? as we said, he's taking responsibility, but he is considering himself that he's unpaid, meaning to say that in the spiritual sense, he is oblivious to, and he's not focused on the physical rewards that Hashem will pay, and he's also not even focused on the spiritual rewards that Hashem promises that he will pay. In fact, that person is that shamer who's doing it because he feels that it's the right thing to do. He's the person that, as expressed in Maimonides, in the great Rambam's word, and he's in his book, he serves God out of love, not because of anything that exists in the world and that he might get this physical reward, and nor to inherit the good in the world. Rather, he does it because it's the truth, and this is the emes. And that is his level of explanation, of understanding that he will do it, and he's doing it like a true child loves his father. He's doing it not because he's a servant of Hashem. He's not doing it because he has to do it and he's locked into these processes. He's doing it as one who truly loves Hashem, and therefore doing it and doing it for the love of Hashem himself, and because he connects and he wants to connect to Hashem in the totalist way. Now, this is a beautiful expression and a beautiful teaching in the idea of the legal code of the shamer, of the legal code of the person who's been entrusted with this charge. And in fact, Hashem has entrusted each one of us with the most beautiful present that he can give us. That is the divine soul. And it's the divine soul, those capabilities to live beyond the physical realm and to live in a spiritual kingdom and in a spiritual, and understand the higher purposes and the higher beauty in the world. He's given us this charge to be responsible and to act on behalf of the soul. Now, what happens if one of these shamerim, one of these guardians, these watchmen, what happens if they don't do the right thing and they're not and they haven't abided by what they are supposed to say? The verses continue and say we have to go, in the legal sense, we have to go to the Beis Din, we have to go to the court of the judicial court, and we have to resolve the issue. And what happens, depending on the level of the shamer that it is, he has to make a shvua, he has to make an oath. And as part of that oath, and part of the circumstances, when we go, we reveal the truth of the matter of what has happened. So in the case of dishonesty, in the case of the physical dishonesty in the Beis Din, as I said, we have to go to the judge and you have to do a shvua. And then by virtue of making an oath, we will the judges decide on what recompense, if there has to be, and if he's lying, if he's telling the truth. Basically, it is our responsibility to ensure that the pekodem, the object that we've been entrusted with, remains in good workable condition. That is to say, our soul, our nefesh, remains protected and haven't been downgraded. And that when it returns to heaven, it returns in a better circumstance than it was before it descended into the body. However, at times, just like the shamer, he gets into a circumstance where something has gone wrong. Sometimes in our own neshama, we are not necessarily faithful in the fullest extent to the soul's owner, to the owner of the object, to the owner of the soul. And we're not fulfilling the job that we promised we would do. The verse in verse 8 actually discusses what our problem is. In verse 8, it says that whether it says that you have to go to the judges, and it says whether it involves an ox or a donkey or a sheep, verse 8, or any object or any other object, and then a witness might say that this is it. We'll discuss that as we go along. So this means to say that if a person in a spiritual sense says that somehow my watchmanship over my neshama, over my soul, hasn't gone in the positive sense, whether it involves an ox or a donkey or a sheep, meaning that the ox and the donkey and the sheep in Hasidic thought is equated to the characteristics of an ox, a donkey, or a sheep, and say those are the challenges that our own animal soul provides to our nefesh elokis, to our divine soul. The self-centeredness of a goring ox. What's a goring ox? An ox that is running around with a lot of energies and not concerning anything else and just breaking things. That's one type of Yetzer Hara, one type of person. And that type of person tramples upon everything in its path. Then there can be the donkey. Hasidic thought talks about a donkey as being the animal which is cold even in the summertime. Understanding that, we interpret that to mean that a person, even when the summer, when everything's hot, when everything's excitable, when the movement and there's a lot of spirituality around, this person is cold. He's indifferent to spirituality. Or he might be like a sheep. What's a sheep? Characters of sheep. Goes with the crowd. Where there might be all the spirituality around, but he's going with the crowd. He's going with the other nations. He's not following his Jewish tradition. These aspects, the ox, the donkey, and the sheep, converted into a spiritual sense means that if a person has abused his divine soul, he hasn't used it out properly. What does he do? He says, the verse tells us, it might have been because he's like an ox. He's not considering of everybody else around. He might be like a donkey. He's not being enthusiastic, and he's cold, he's indifferent. Or he might be like the sheep. He's going with those other people, with the other crowd. And there are the different challenges. What is he supposed to do? He has to move himself and take himself to the Besdin. He must take himself to the Jewish court. He must connect himself to the rabbis and the teachings of the Torah. And then when he will do that, when he will connect himself to the better part, to this better part of his spirit, to his teachers, to his to the people who will help him along, his own leaders in the community, leaders in the spirit. When he goes to that Botei Dinim, when he goes to those judges, when he goes to those rabbis and he connects himself to that, they will understand what to do and they will prescribe for him what he's required to do. The verse continues, and if he is guilty, what does he have to do? He has to pay. He has to pay double. Meaning, what does this mean that he has to pay? What does this mean that he has to pay double? The idea is he has to pay as a fine, and the verse says that whoever the judges find guilty, they have to make a double restitution. What does that mean in our case? In our spiritual, mapping that into a spiritual sense, that means that that a person has to paying double, he has to double harness himself. He has to take the powers of the two souls that he's got, the animal soul and the heavenly soul embedded in him. He has to take the strength and the wild power that the animal soul has, and that could be an ox, or it could be the power of the animal soul, how it's like the donkey. That means a donkey who's got the ability to carry a heavy load for a long journey. That is, he's capable of putting himself and working to achieve. And when he joins together his animal soul to his nefesh elokis, to his godly soul, when he links together the power of the ox, the power of the heavy load, or even the sheep's compliant nature of moving ahead. And when he utilizes that, when he pays double, he utilizes all the aspects of his two neshamas, and he brings them together towards the service of the Creator. Then he will be advancing his cause and advancing everything advancing the cause of Hashem, and advancing his divine mission that he has to bring the world to become a better place. And in this way, he utilizes the fullest, most profound messages of the Torah, how that it's expressed in the legal code, and employing those ideas in a spiritual sense, employing them to further the cause of Hashem by discharging his role as a watchman and moving ahead and doing everything he's required to do, and moving ahead, becoming one of those 4 levels of watchmen, hopefully to the highest level, as the Rambam said, and achieving the total combination. And how does he do it? Again, by the double usage, by the double capabilities of his soul, but also employing what the rabbi in the physical sense, in the Bezdin, they make them do a shvur. They make him do an oath. What does it mean to take the oath? When a person takes an oath, it means he's strengthening himself to do what he needs to do. And in fact, taking an oath means that a person invokes something that he has even higher. In the Jewish sense, we say that the neshama, before he's even born, is given the neshama is told to take an oath that he will do the right thing before he comes embedded in a physical body. This idea of taking an oath isn't necessarily the idea of taking an oath, but more of the idea that we imbue the neshama to draw on the reservoir of divine power and the divine consciousness that Hashem has given when he was still prior to being born, and giving him that so that he'll be able to and willingly be able to employ that in his life. So this oath that he takes is the power and the energies which Hashem has already imbued into our spirit, and he gives and he utilizes that. So through going to the judge and drawing the oath, that is going to the Torah and going to connecting himself to the leaders of the Jewish leaders of our generation who teach Torah and imbue us with the strength, we can connect to the oath that Hashem has given us, the spirit to strengthen our lives and to complete and move ourselves from one stage to the other stage in terms of being Shemrim, and to implement all of Hashem's desires and our desires for the purposes of Hashem. So I leave you with those beautiful and powerful thoughts of how the Jew can employ the legal code, the Jewish legal code, in his service of Hashem. Okay, wishing everybody a great week and a good time for studying the Torah and implementing all these good ideas. Bye-bye.
I don't know if I've heard it that way.
Sorry, what?